Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there lived a lovely princess named Snow White. She had skin as white as the purest snow, hair as black as ebony, and cheeks as rosy as ripe apples. Snow White was always kind and cheerful, and her laughter could brighten even the darkest days. One sunny morning, Snow White playing in the castle gardens, she came across a little bird with vibrant feathers. The bird chirped and danced, catching Snow White's attention. It hopped from branch to branch, leading Snow White deeper into the forest. The forest is so beautiful, with tall trees, colorful flowers, and friendly animals. As Snow White followed the little bird, she stumbled upon a tiny cottage nestled among the trees. Curious, she opened the door and discovered that the cottage belonged to 7 adorable dwarfs. The dwarfs were named Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, Grumpy, Dopey, and Doc. They were surprised to find Snow White at their doorstep. They welcomed her with open arms. Snow White's heart was filled with joy as she made new friends. Together, they played games, sang songs, and danced happily in the cottage. Snow White's kind nature and gentle spirit won the hearts of the dwarfs, and they became like a big family. They took care of one another, making sure everyone was happy and loved. One day, while the dwarfs were away working in the mines, Snow White heard a gentle knock at the door. When she opened it, she found a friendly old lady holding a basket of shiny red apples. The old lady, with a mischievous twinkle in her eye, and with sweet and inviting voice, asked Snow White,
"Would you like an apple, my dear?"
Snow White, being polite, and took a bite from the reddest apple. Oh no! The apple was cursed. Snow White fell into a deep, deep sleep, and nothing could wake her. When the dwarfs returned home, they found Snow White lying peacefully, fast asleep. They were filled with sadness and hugged her tightly, hoping she would wake up. They couldn't see their dear friend in such a state. But then, as if by magic, a handsome prince arrived in the forest. The prince had heard about Snow White and her situation. The prince leaned down and gave a gentle kiss on Snow White's cheek. Suddenly, her eyes fluttered open, and a smile spread across her face. True love had broken the curse. The dwarfs rejoiced and celebrated. Snow White and the prince danced together, their joy filling the forest with enchantment. From that day forward, Snow White and the prince lived happily in the castle, surrounded by love, laughter, and friendship of the dwarfs. Whenever children hear this story, they remember the kindness of Snow White, and how true love can overcome any obstacle.
The end.
Once upon a time, a girl named Cinderella lived with her stepmother and 2 stepsisters. Poor Cinderella had to work hard all day long, so the others could rest. It was she who cooked the meals. It was she who kept the fire going. The poor girl could not stay clean from all the ashes and cinders by the fire, and that is why they called her Cinderella. One day, some big news came to town. The king and queen were going to have a ball. It was time for the prince to find a bride. All of the young ladies in the land were invited to come. The ladies were wild with joy. They would wear their most beautiful gown and fix their hair extra nice. At Cinderella's house, she now had extra work to do. She had to make 2 brand new gowns for her stepsisters. The 2 stepsisters started complaining about how Cinderella was making the dresses. "When can I?" Cinderella's stepmother marched into the room. "When can you what?" Cinderella's stepmother said in her "I hate you, Cinderella" voice. "Well," said Cinderella, "when will I have time to make my own dress for the ball?" "You?" yelled the stepmother. "Who said you were going to the ball?" "What a laugh," said one stepsister. The stepsisters said Cinderella was a mess, and that she didn't belong, while laughing at her. Cinderella said to herself, "When they look at me, maybe they see a mess. Oh, I wish I could go to the ball." Soon the time came for the stepmother and stepsisters to leave for the big party. Their fine carriage came to the door, and the stepsisters and stepmother hopped inside. And they were off. "Have a good time," Cinderella called out, but her stepmother and stepsisters did not turn around to see her. She said aloud, "I wish I could go to the ball, too." Then all of a sudden, in front of her was a magical fairy. "You called?" said the fairy. "Did I?" said Cinderella. "Who are you, may I ask?" "Why, your fairy godmother, of course. I know your wish. And I have come to grant it." "But," said Cinderella, "you can't grant me it." "Excuse me," said the fairy godmother in a huff. "Did I not just show up out of thin air? Then let me be the one to say what is possible or not." "Well, I do want to go to the ball, but look at me." The fairy looked at the dress. "You do look a bit of a mess, child," said the fairy godmother. "Even if I had something nice to wear," said Cinderella, "I would have no way to get there." "I can help with that," said the fairy as she tapped her wand on Cinderella's head. At once, Cinderella was all clean and was wearing a dazzling blue gown. Her hair was set up higher her head inside a golden band. "This is wonderful," said Cinderella. "Who said I was done?" said the fairy godmother as she once more tapped Cinderella's head with her wand. At once, a beautiful carriage came to be, with a driver and 4 white horses. "Am I dreaming?" said Cinderella, looking around her. "It is as real can be," said the fairy godmother. "But there is one thing you must know. The whole spell only lasts till midnight. Everything will go back to how it was before." "Okay, so I leave before midnight," said Cinderella. "Good idea," said the fairy godmother. "My work is done." And with that, the fairy was gone. Cinderella stepped into her carriage, thanking the fairy godmother for all her work even though she was not there. After a minute or two, Cinderella arrived at the ball. All heads turned. The prince was speechless. He felt like he was hypnotized by Cinderella's beauty. He had met many of the young women, but none of them were as beautiful as Cinderella. The prince walked over to Cinderella. "Your Majesty, I am pleased to meet you," said Cinderella with a bow. He and Cinderella started to dance. When the song was over, they danced again. And then they danced again, and yet again. Soon the other maidens at the ball grew jealous. They started complaining about how Cinderella got all the attention. Cinderella and the prince laughed and talked, and they danced some more. In fact, they danced for so long that Cinderella did not see the clock. Suddenly Cinderella remembered the fairy godmother's warning. Cinderella glanced at the clock. Dong! Went the clock. It is almost midnight. Cinderella was now panicking. "Why does that matter?" said the prince. "Dong!" called the clock again. "I must go," said Cinderella. "But we just met," said the prince. "Why leave now?" Cinderella ran to the steps. "But please don't leave," said the prince. Down the stairs she ran. "Please, stop for a moment," said the prince. while running after her. "Oh, dear," she said as one glass slipper fell off her foot on the stair. But Cinderella kept running down as she heard the clock strike again. Dong! The clock was now quiet. It was midnight. The prince picked up Cinderella's slipper and rushed out of the door. He looked around but could not see her blue dress anywhere. The prince had an idea. He thought that he would go to every house and ask all the ladies to put on the slipper. "If it fits, then I know the lady is my future bride," the prince said happily. The prince went from house to house. One young woman after another tried to fit her foot inside the glass slipper, but none could fit. At last the prince came to Cinderella's house. "He is coming," called one stepsister as she looked out the window. "At the door," screamed the other stepsister. "Quick," yelled the stepmother. "One of you must be the one to fit your foot in that slipper," the stepmother demanded. The prince knocked. The stepmother flew open the door. "Come in," she said. "I have two lovely daughters for you to see." The first stepsister tried to place her foot in the glass slipper, but no matter how hard she tried, the glass shoe would not fit. Then the second stepsister tried to fit her foot inside, but her foot was too small. "Are there no other young women in the house?" said the prince. "None," said the stepmother. "Then I must go," said the prince. "Maybe there is one more," said Cinderella, stepping into the room. "I thought you said there were no other young women here," said the prince. "None who matter," said the stepmother in a hiss. "Come here," said the prince, "and try the slipper." The prince got down on one knee and tried the glass slipper on Cinderella's foot. It fit perfectly. Then, from her pocket, Cinderella took out something. It was the other slipper. "I knew it," he cried. "What?" shouted a stepsister. "Not her!" screamed the other stepsister. Cinderella's stepsisters and stepmother shouted in fury. The prince looked into Cinderella's eyes. Cinderella and the prince were so happy that they had found each other. And so Cinderella and the prince were married, and they lived happily ever after. The end.